Weijia, we just heard the president say that despite Russian, statements that they are de-escalating, the U.S. is not seeing any indication that that is actually happening. And the fact that he had this address shows that clearly the U.S. is not convinced that is happening. So, what were the biggest takeaways from President Biden's address in terms of whether Russian aggression towards Ukraine intensifies?
Well, I think the president reiterated that even though that is what we are hearing from Russia, they have not seen evidence of a credible de-escalation, one in earnest, because even if there have been some drawbacks of troops, what matters is where those troops are going and how far they are moving from the border. And clearly, the president was not satisfied with where they are. And so that's why he said at this point, there's no indication that Russia is actually drawing back. And he believes that they could attack any day now. And that is precisely why he's had a flurry of phone calls with foreign leaders, something he talked about, to reiterate that commitment to bolster NATO's eastern flank and to take action against Russia if it does take any military action in Ukraine.
Weijia, the president said, obviously, they're ready to take and act decisively, but they want to give diplomacy every chance to succeed. At this point now, is this a matter of hearing from a Sergei Lavrov, the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Russia, perhaps now that the president has made these statements less than 20 minutes ago?
Well, I think we have to see, because words are one thing, but actions are another. And I know that they are closely monitoring what's actually happening there. And so the reason the president says that window is still open is because the conversations continue. But again, until we are seeing the fruits of that, until the president is satisfied with what he is watching on the ground there and what he is seeing, then it's difficult to say what those words really mean. And that's why he talked about all the things that not only the U.S., but of course with NATO allies, they are prepared to do in the case of an invasion.
And what are the next steps when thinking about how to address the cyber security issues that we've seen today? Do you know what the next steps are in reference to today's cyber attacks in Ukraine?
For weeks now, sources here have said that they believe that any sort of action would go hand in hand with a cyber attack like the one we saw today. Ukraine has already confirmed that their major banks, that Ukrainian websites have lost service in many cases, and they are working to restore service. We have not heard an official response from the U.S. As the investigation continues, and certainly no assign of formal blame to Russia. But we do know that the intelligence community has been closely monitoring the possibility of cyber attacks on a U.S. infrastructure. But so far, there's no indication that that will happen. But in terms of what happens next, I think they have to assess the blame here. They have to determine whether Russia was actually involved with these attacks against Ukraine, which, by the way, would be the second major attacks on these Ukrainian systems that we've seen in recent weeks. And again, officials have said over and over that they do believe that would be one pretense to an invasion.
So, Weijia, the president made it clear that there would not be American troops on the ground in Ukraine, regardless of what Russia does. But was he as clear on what the immediate repercussions would be if Russia takes military action?
Well, I think he has said from the very beginning that the sanctions package that he would like to deliver and implement would be swift and severe. Of course, Congress is still working out exactly what that would entail. But the message really has not changed from the beginning with regard to how serious the president would like to take sanctions on Russia and perhaps on Putin himself. Now, whether that would actually be harmful to Putin is another story, but it would certainly send a strong message. And so that is how he is, in one way, prepared to respond. And I should also say that, even though the president has been so focused on this path toward diplomacy, we've also learned how clear-eyed they have been about the possibility of war. The National Security Council formed a Tiger team back in November to start working with multi-agencies to go over an exact plan in the case that Russia invades Ukraine. So they are prepared. They have a playbook. The question is now whether they have to use it.
All right. Well, Weijia Jiang at the White House, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.